Hello dear students and welcome to Sri Jayendra Rank Zone classes. I am Amit Ajmani and I hope we are all set for taking up the next session. And what we are going to do today, we'll be taking up and continuing our chapter Force and Laws of Motion. Now in the previous session, we discussed about the first part of this chapter, that is force. We also discussed about two laws of motion, that is Newton's first law of motion and Newton's second law of motion. Along with that, we also discussed about momentum. We discussed about various questions related to or based on Newton's first law of motion and Newton's second law of motion. Quite importantly, we discussed about inertia and the types of inertia and of course the questions based on inertia. Now in today's session, we'll be taking up the Newton's third law of motion. Now what exactly Newton's third law of motion states? It states that whenever one body exerts a force on another body, right, then the second body exerts an equal and opposite force on the first body. So conclusion is, we can conclude this Newton third law of motion in a very simple terms, that action and reaction are equal and opposite. Whenever one body is doing some action on another body, then the second body will exert an equal and opposite reaction force on the first body. And this we can very well relate with the help of very common example, that if we just wear skates, roller skates in our feet, and after wearing skates, if you push a wall, now you are pushing the wall in the forward direction, right? But because of Newton's third law of motion, the wall will also exert equal and opposite force on you, and that is the main reason why we will also come backward. The more force you apply, the more force with which you will come backward. So this is Newton's third law of motion. There are so many places where this Newton's third law of motion is applicable. Let us try to relate a few cases. First and quite common one is, we have seen recoiling of a gun on firing a bullet from it. What is meant by recoiling of a gun? That the gun gives a back jerk, that is recoiling. Now when we fire a bullet, the gun also recoils back. This can be explained on the basis of Newton's third law of motion, that when the gun is firing a bullet, the bullet goes with a great force, great speed, and while it is going in the forward direction, it exerts an equal and opposite force in the backward direction, because of which the gun recoils back. Now the bullet is going with such a great speed, but does the gun recoil back with that same speed? No. Now what could be the possible reason? Quite simple, that the mass of bullet is very less as compared to the mass of gun. Gun is very much heavier, and that is why the force which is exerted on the gun is making less difference as compared to the force acting on the bullet. Got it? Now the next is working of a rocket. How does a rocket go upward? It is going vertically upward in the space, right, against gravity. Now how does it happen? Again Newton's third law of motion comes into play. What exactly happens is, we burn the fuels. Now what are the fuels? They are known as rocket propellants. Now what are those fuels? Liquid hydrogen and liquid oxygen. Now when these liquid hydrogen and liquid oxygen are burned, they produce steam along with a lot of energy, because hydrogen has a very high calorific value. It provides a lot of energy. Now this steam is very high pressured. So this highly pressurized steam, it actually applies the force in the downward direction. The steam that is liberated and it goes into the downward direction, and it applies an equal and opposite pressure and force on the rocket in the opposite direction is in the upward direction. So because of that, the rocket is able to propel vertically upwards against gravity. We have seen at the time of festivals like Deepavali, we also burn rockets, the crackers, right? The same fundamental applies in that also. It also goes with the same reason. Quite importantly, how we walk. Now, whenever we walk, it is also action and reaction playing its role. When we are walking, in that case with one foot, we have to apply force on the ground in the backward direction. Now when we apply force in the backward direction, the ground also exerts an equal and opposite force, because of which we are able to move forward. There are so many examples like bow and arrow. We have seen we stretch a bow in the backward direction, and when we leave it, it goes in the front direction. And the force with which you are stretching the bow, the arrow is going to go with the same speed, with the same force. Similarly, in the case of catapult, it also make use of this action and reaction being equal and opposite. We have seen the animals pulling the carts. They are also applying force on the ground, with which they get the equal and opposite force from the ground, due to which they are able to pull the cart. You must have seen when you are just filling a balloon. Now, if you are filling a balloon with the air and just don't tie a knot, after filling it, just leave it. It will be a very funny and good observation. You will find that the balloon, it starts dancing and coming towards backwards. Why is it so? Because the air in the balloon, the moment you release the mouth of the balloon, the air with a great force goes in the forward direction, and while doing so, it exerts an equal and opposite force on the balloon in the opposite direction, that is backwards. That is why the balloon comes dancing back. So there are so many other examples also based on Newton's third law of motion, that is action and reaction are equal and opposite, right? Next we'll be studying about law of conservation of momentum. Now this is quite important. Momentum we have already studied in our previous class, in which we studied that what exactly is momentum. Momentum is the product of mass and velocity of a body, right? Momentum is represented by small p, and m is the mass, v is the velocity. Now, law of conservation of momentum states that when two or more bodies act upon one another, right, in that case, their total momentum remains constant, provided no external forces are acting. So what exactly this means? This means that momentum can neither be created nor be destroyed. The momentum which was there in the bodies initially before acting upon each other is equal to the momentum after acting upon each other. Let us take an example of two vehicles or two objects which are colliding with each other. Now, when they are moving along, they have momentum, right? Let there be two bodies, the body A and the body B. Okay. Now, let us say that the mass of the body A is m1 and the mass of body B is m2. A is moving with an initial velocity, let us write it with u1, and B is moving with an initial velocity, let it be u2. Now, the momentum of A can be represented as mass of A multiplied by initial velocity of A, and the initial momentum of this body B can be related as mass of B multiplied by initial velocity of B. So this is the momentum of body A, this is the momentum of body B, and if we combine them both, then it becomes total momentum of these two bodies before collision, before they are colliding with each other. Right. Now supposedly these two bodies collide. After collision, obviously their velocities are going to change. So let us try to represent them, that let the velocity, the final velocity of this body A after collision be v1, and the velocity of body B after collision be v2. Right. Now what will be the final momentum of body A? Of course, momentum is the product of mass and velocity. So now we'll be taking the final momentum of body A to be the product of its mass m1 and its final velocity v1. And the final momentum of body B will be the mass of B and the final velocity of B. This is the final momentum of body A and this is the final momentum of body B, and if we just sum them up, we'll get the total momentum of these two bodies after collision. Now, the law of conservation of momentum states that the total momentum before collision and the total momentum after collision will be same, will be equal. So, this is what exactly is the net effect of law of conservation of momentum, which says that m1 u1 plus m2 u2 will be equal to m1 v1 plus m2 v2. Now, please try to relate each and everything individually. First of all, we need to know what are these m1, u1, m1, v1, m2, u2 and v2. m1 is the mass of the first object. m2 is the mass of the second object. u1 is the initial velocity of first object. u2 is the initial velocity of second object. v1 is the final velocity of first object. v2 is the final velocity of second object. Correct? This m1 u1 is the initial momentum of first object. m2 u2 is the initial momentum of second object. So adding up, we will get this to be the total initial momentum. Initial means this is before collision. Now m1 v1 is the final momentum of first object. m2 v2 is the final momentum of second object, and combining these two we get the total final momentum, that is the momentum after collision. And law of conservation of momentum says that these two are equal. So total momentum before collision is equal to the total momentum after collision. There are so many areas where this law of conservation of momentum is applicable, that we have studied just above in the Newton's third law of motion. The same thing applies here also, whether it is the motion of a rocket, or it is the recoiling of a gun, or it is the motion of a jet aeroplane, or if we are just having the motion of bow and arrow, or motion of catapult or balloon, or when we jump from a boat to the shore, we see that we are jumping in the forward direction but the boat will go in the backward direction. So all these are examples and applications of law of conservation of momentum. Right? This is quite important. Law of conservation of momentum. You need to relate, you need to learn, you need to understand it properly and thoroughly. Right? So this is about law of conservation of momentum. Now next that we are going to talk about is, we'll be talking about impulse. Now what exactly is meant by impulse? If a large quantity of force is applied for a very short interval of time, then the product of force and time is called impulse. Right? I repeat that when a large quantity of force is applied in a very short interval of time, then the product of force and time is called impulse. So we have just mathematically said that impulse is the product of force and time. We know that the SI unit of force is Newton and time is second. So the unit of impulse becomes Newton second, or it is actually kilogram meter per second. Why so? Because we know that Newton is equal to kilogram meter per second square. So putting the value of Newton, we relate the unit of impulse to be kilogram meter per second. Right? Now, let us try to relate a few examples of this pulse. This impulse, let us see a few examples. We have seen that in Newton's second law of motion, we discussed whenever a cricketer is catching a ball, he moves his hands backward. Now, why is it so? Because if he doesn't do it, then in that case, the time being less will generate more amount of force. Right? Secondly, we have seen that all the vehicles, whether it is our scooties or scooters or motorbikes or buses or cars, they are all provided with shockers. Why so? Because when they are going in some kind of ditch or something, then in that case impulse is generated, a very large quantity of force is applied in a very short interval of time. So shockers are provided for protection, right? So this is what you need to know about impulse. Next, quite importantly, we'll be studying about friction. Now, what exactly is friction? We already know. It is a force. It is an opposing force. We call this friction to be an opposing force. And when exactly this opposing force is generated? When two bodies are in contact with each other. So whenever two bodies are in contact with each other, one is sliding over the other, then a force is exerted between them, and that force is exerted at the point of contact, which prevents the one body from slipping over on the other. That force is called frictional force, force of friction. And this force of friction always opposes the relative motion between the two surfaces which are in contact, right? So if a body is moving over other body, in that case the force of friction is always going to oppose the relative motion, the motion of the first body relative to the other. And this is what we have seen whenever we are riding a bicycle, we have to pedal, and if we stop pedaling, then after some time we see that our that bicycle that slows down consistently and continuously. It slows down, and there will be a point when it comes to a halt, to a stop. Why? Because of the frictional force which is actually offered by the road towards the tires of the bicycle. Got it? Now this friction is of various types that we need to relate one by one. These are the 5 types of friction we'll be studying about: static friction, limiting friction, kinetic friction, sliding friction, and rolling friction. What are these? Let us try to understand them one by one. Static friction. Now, static friction basically comes into play when a body tends to move or slide over the surface of another body, right? It just tends, it is starting to move. Actual motion has not yet started. So in static friction we need to relate that the actual motion has not yet started. So that frictional force, which is a self-adjusting force, it is self-adjusting because it becomes equal to the applied force. If an object is kept, for example an almirah or a dressing table or a very heavy table or a bed, then in that case there is static friction between that almirah, this particular bed or table, and the ground. You have to apply force, and a great amount of force, to overcome this opposing force of friction, and after then only the object is going to move. And how much is that amount of force? We can relate that probably one single person cannot move a double bed on its own. We cannot do it, no? So this is static friction. I repeat, it is the force which comes into play when one body tends to move over the surface of another body, but it is not actually moving. Right now, it is not actually in motion. The actual motion has not yet started. That is known as static friction. Clear? Now, the second type of frictional force is the limiting friction. Now, what exactly is limiting friction? The maximum static friction force which comes into play when one body is just at the verge of moving over the surface of the other body, that is known as the limiting friction. Quite importantly, the name is given because it limits, it restricts, it stops the second body for moving. That is called the limiting friction. The third type of frictional force is the kinetic friction. Now, what exactly is kinetic friction? This is once again an opposing force that comes into play when one body actually moves over the surface of another body. Kinetic, this kinetic term, we are well aware that kinetic term is related to motion. So when a body is already moving on the surface of another body, then the kind of frictional force that comes into existence, that is called the kinetic friction. Correct? Let us see the next type of friction, sliding friction. Self-explanatory, with the name sliding itself, we can relate that this is the type of friction which comes into play when one body slides over the surface of another body. So one thing is that a body is in a straight line moving along horizontally on a particular plane, then if it is moving, it is called kinetic friction. But if it is sliding on some other body, then in that case it is called sliding friction. And another is the rolling friction, which is the type of friction which comes into play when one body rolls over the surface of the another body, right? Like the tires of our vehicles, like cricket balls or any kind of balls, they are rolling on another surface, then that kind of friction is known as rolling friction. So these are the 5 type of friction that we need to relate, we need to remember. Correct? Now there is another term which you should be acquainted with, you should be familiar with, that is coefficient of friction. What exactly is coefficient of friction? It is the ratio of force of friction to the normal reaction. It is represented by the symbol U, and it can be mathematically expressed as the force of friction divided by the normal reaction. Now what exactly is reaction? We have already studied. Let us try to understand it once again, that if this is an object which is kept on a particular surface, the gravitational force is going to pull it down, but an opposite force acts on it in the upward direction, which is called the normal reaction force. So if we take the ratio of force of friction to the normal reaction, then in that case we call it to be coefficient of friction. Now when we calculate this coefficient of friction, we will just get our answer in a absolute number. So this coefficient of friction has no unit. There are times when the examiner gives us trick questions. Trick questions means that he'll ask us what is the unit of coefficient of friction. So all these physical quantities in physics which has no unit, we need to remember these quantities, right? Now, when we compare the types of friction, we have seen the 5 types of friction. Then in that case, we have studied 2 frictions, sliding and rolling. The rolling friction is lesser as compared to the sliding friction. This may be asked now, which friction is more? The sliding friction is more. Why exactly? The limited frictional force is independent of the area of contact, but it depends on the nature of the material of the surfaces in contact, and it also depends upon how rough or how smooth the surface is. So we need to remember that rolling friction is comparatively lesser than the sliding friction. Now this friction is opposing the motion of the bodies. Therefore, we tend to make some measures in order to reduce friction. How can we reduce friction? We can reduce friction by these following ways. First one is by polishing the surfaces. Because if the surfaces are polished, then in that case they will be smooth surfaces and the friction will be less. Again, by lubrication. We have just studied the various causes of more friction are the roughness of the surfaces, nature of the material of the surfaces in contact, right? So if we are lubricating it, then in that case there will be smoothness which will offer less resistance. We can also reduce the resistance by this friction by proper selection of material, because friction depends on the nature of material. Again, by streamlining the shape of the body also, we can reduce the frictional force. By using ball bearings, this we have seen in almost all the machinery parts that rotate, right? So by using ball bearings, we can reduce the friction. So these are a few ways by which we can reduce the friction. Now every coin has 2 faces, and so is friction. There are certain advantages also, and there are certain disadvantages also which friction offers. Let us try to relate it one by one. How friction is handy, it is important for us because it is only due to friction that we are able to walk. If there would have been no friction, we would not have been able to walk. We have been trying to walk and we have been slipping every time. It is just because of friction that we are walking. It's possible for us to walk. Another advantage is that two bodies stick together due to friction only. If there is no friction, it would have been very tough in order to just keep the body sticking together. Very important role played by friction is in our vehicles. We know that whenever we want to control or lower down our speed, we just apply brakes. Now what exactly these brakes are doing? Brakes are just the contact forces which are stopping the tires of our vehicles by providing this frictional force, the opposing force. Had there been no friction, we would not have been able to control our speeds, and we can very well imagine the consequences, so many accidents taking place, right? Another advantage of friction is that it is only because of friction that the transfer of motion from any one part of a machine to another part through the belts takes place. If there is no friction, then in that case the motion would not have been able to get transferred. So there are many machines which make use of this friction. So these are a few advantages of friction, but there are certain disadvantages also. What are the disadvantages? It is because of this friction that there is so much of wear and tear of machinery, because the parts they come in contact with each other. That is why they just get wear and tear up, and therefore the life of the machinery parts that reduces a lot. So it is quite expensive. Some machines are really very expensive because of friction. Their life is reduced, and that is a financial loss. Another disadvantage is that this frictional force, it results in the production of heat. Whenever two surfaces are rubbing against each other continuously, heat energy is generated, and this heat energy is also responsible for the damages caused to the machinery parts. So these are a few disadvantages of friction, and this is all about force and laws of motion. Now, the chapter has come to the end, and so is our class. But as always, now you have been studying through me for quite some time, and you are quite aware that every class I make sure to remind you that you need to learn also. Always, after studying, after going through, after understanding a particular topic or a particular chapter, we always need to brush up as to what exactly we have studied in this chapter. So let me do it for you. In this chapter, the chapter has been divided into two parts: force and laws of motion. We talked about the force, we talked about the effects of force, we talked about the various types of forces, that is balanced, unbalanced, contact and non-contact forces. We studied about torque, its SI unit. We need to relate which one of these are vector quantities and scalar quantities. Force and torque, they both are vector quantities. This was about force. Then we discussed about Newton's laws of motion. There are in total three laws of motion: first law of motion, second law of motion, and third law of motion. We just went through and understood the definitions as to what these laws stated. Quite importantly, we discussed about a few reasoning questions based on each law. Then we studied about inertia. We studied about the various types of inertia, that is inertia of rest, inertia of motion, and inertia of direction. And we studied a few examples of inertia and a few questions based on inertia. Quite importantly, we studied about momentum, initial and final momentum. We also studied about the law of conservation of momentum, how to derive the consequence, and the various applications. Then we talked about impulse. We took a few examples of impulse, and we also mentioned about friction. What exactly is friction? Its definition, its various types. In totality, we have studied 5 types of friction, namely static friction, limiting friction, kinetic friction, sliding friction, and rolling friction. We studied what are these and when exactly they come into play. Then we talked about coefficient of friction. We talked about a few methods to reduce friction, what are the various advantages of friction, and what are a few disadvantages of friction. So this is the chapter all about. You need to memorize the topics. You need to memorize under what topic, if we have any kind of types or examples or any reasoning based questions. So you need to learn, you need to keep them in mind. When you are preparing for your NTSC exams, you need to relate the objective type questions and specifically related to the quantities being scalar or vector quantities. We need to very specifically relate the units in which these quantities are expressed, especially those which don't have any quantity, like coefficient of friction doesn't have any kind of unit. So we need to relate and keep them in mind, because the trick questions can come at times and we may get confused. The formulas we need to relate, what are the various formulas, the types, and importantly the applications of all the topics, where exactly they are being applied. So this is all you are required to understand, and this is all you are required to learn. Correct? So we are over with this chapter, and I want you people to learn whatever topics we have studied in this chapter, because once you learn them, then when I will be discussing the questions related to these topics which have actually come in the previous examination papers, then if you have already studied, it will be very much convenient for you to relate. And if you have learned them, you can revise them, you can take it as a normal revision, you can take it as a test for yourself. Correct? So before taking up the next class, please learn all the things related to this particular chapter. In the next class, I'll be discussing with you the very important thing, that is the question answers based on this particular chapter. Fine? So till then, just enjoy yourself, have a good time, study hard, and take care of yourself. Thank you so much.